Financial?
What are your objections?
What are some of the biggest issues parents have with their dating or marriage relationship? You can think of things.
Race?
Grace? What is that?
Race.
Or race. Oh yeah, race is a big one.
Distance.
Distance? Okay. What else?
Must have PhD.
Must have. That's not true. What else, guys? Kind of brainstorm.
Height.
Huh?
Height.
Height? Yeah, I can be an issue.
Faith.
Faith? Yeah. Anything else?
Language.
Language. Language is a big one.
Kind of what guys said, like education.
Education. Yeah. Okay. Today we're going to talk about a love worth fighting for. Where's that from? No one knows that's from?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. No. The Life and Love of Hudson and Marie Taylor. I am David Pat. I'm from OMF International, which is a missions agency we're talking about in a second. This is why we're talking about this. All right. Today's lesson is going to be on wisdom. All right. Proverbs is a wisdom book. This is how you treat wisdom books. All right. Whenever you see something wisdom in the Bible, it's not as if you apply it generally across your life and in all instances it's true. All right. So like a proverb would be, "Early bird catches the worm." That does not mean every bird out there, right, who is like flying around at 4 a.m. is going to catch a worm. Obviously, you know that, right? It's just when you live by wisdom, more often than not, you're gonna do the right thing. So whenever you see wisdom literature in the Bible, that's how you should take it. More often than not, when you live by wisdom, all right, things are gonna happen to you. It doesn't mean that like you're always gonna win and life's always gonna be good. It's just that more often than not, it's better to live smartly than dumbly. Okay? So, why are we talking about this? What are we looking for in a relationship? A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. When thinking about a relationship, when do you know that this is a woman that you should fight for? This is a woman that you should pursue. This is a woman that you want to continue to be with and to have a relationship with. Noble character. Noble character. If you find someone with noble character, the Bible says in Proverbs 12:4, is that she will be like your crown. Right? So think about the picture, the imagery that the writer of Proverbs is trying to show you. A crown, it represents glory. It represents worth, value, treasure. Right? When you see a king, usually the first thing you notice about them is their crown that they wear. Right? And the nature of that crown shows you the kind of king that person is. So if a king wears like a bronze small crown, you're like, oh, this king is like whatever. All right, so it's probably a lesser king. If a king wears like just a ridiculous like jades and diamonds and all this stuff, you're like, dang, this king is super rich, super important. Now the writer of Proverbs is saying the same thing. Your wife is a reflection of you in that sense. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. This is like the craziest imagery. You guys are too young to have arthritis, okay? If you think about what arthritis or joint pain is, right? It's like every move you take, there is pain. And that's what Proverbs is saying. If you pursue the wrong person, if you're in a relationship with the wrong person, right? In bad relationship, it's like every move you take, it feels like pain and decay in your bones. Those are the stakes. Those are the stakes, all right? So if a woman is of noble character, you fight and you pursue and you chase. Because one day if she becomes your wife, she's like your crown, right? And like I see people like stand in line for free donuts and stuff all the time, all right? Or like there's like $1 off a smoothie and people stand in line for that stuff. And it's because like you feel like this thing of worth, I will give up my time and sacrifice for this thing. Proverbs is saying the same thing. Except it's saying that there's an actual thing of value, not a free donut. There is actual crown full of jewels and some women are like super rare, like super noble character, like awesome person. And Proverbs saying like fight for that person. Because that person is like a husband's crown. Right? At the same time, a disgraceful wife is like decaying your bones. It's like run. Because every step you take, you will feel that pain. All right, it's like a pain that like the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, there is pain. It is decay in your bones. That's for the guys. Proverbs 20. Many claim to have unfailing love, but a faithful person who can find? The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are those children after them. And some translations use man in this sense. Many claim to have unfailing love, but a faithful person, some translations use man, who can find? The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are their children after them. Judge a person by their character. For women. For women, I always say, here's a wisdom. How do you find out what a person's like? Reputation. Reputation matters. Who are their friends? Right? What do respected people say of them? Right? So, example of this. If I want to find out how good a basketball player is, I go ask the basketball coach. Right? I just ask like a random dude off the street, like, hey, how good is that guy at basketball? They wouldn't know. I would ask the basketball coach or another basketball player, how good is that guy? Right? Because that person's in that sport. So if you want to find a person of high character, what do? Ask a person of high character who knows that person. Many claim to have unfailing love, but a faithful person who can find? There are few people in this world, and you guys know this, you guys are older now, right, who are really high character. So women, here's advice to you. If there's a person of really high character, that person's rare. That person's worth fighting for. Right? If there's a guy of high character, of high reputation, of high class, that's a person worth fighting for. Because the righteous lead blameless lives, and blessed are their children after them. One of the things I love about Christian history is that you can see the result of their lives and what happens after they've gone to be with Christ. This is true. Blessed are the children after them. When you look at the heroes of the faith, it's not just them, right, and their immediate family that are blessed. If you look at generations after them, they're super blessed. Example in American history, Jonathan Edwards. Raise your hand on that name. Jonathan Edwards. Some of you do. Jonathan Edwards was a dean of Princeton way back in the day, 1700s. He was a leader of the Great Awakening in the U.S. Wrote a bunch of books. Jonathan Edwards and his wife Sarah Edwards were like just pillars of the American landscape. All right, so they were leaders in the church, just theologians, awesome people. But the reason why we super remember them partly is because historians did a study 100 years later after they died. 100 years later, there were about 200 Edwards in America. And what were they? There were judges, there were politicians, there were doctors, there were businessmen. Almost in every single field, there were Edwards. All right? And without the Edwards family, America would not be what it was. And they were all living like upright lives and just awesome in their fields. That was the legacy of the Edwards. 200 of them after. And 100 years later, they shaped the American landscape. Blessed are the children after them. So women, fight for a guy like that. Because not just your immediate family, but those who come after you are going to be blessed. Right? There is a love that you should strive and struggle and fight for. So let's talk about the story today. We start with Hudson Taylor. He's a passionate innovator, some would call rebel. He's spiritual. Passionate. Hudson Taylor, guess what country he's from? It's the 1800s. Take a guess. England. Okay. When you think about 1800s, you think England. It was like pretty much the biggest empire in the world. He got called by God because one day he was reading, his family's Christian, and then they were on a trip somewhere, and he was just looking through his parents' books and stuff like that. He found a gospel tract, read it, and realized he wasn't saved, and at that moment became converted. It's one of those God things. Like you can kind of tell in his life that God has already called him. So no one physically preached to him. He just read something, a little gospel tract, and he got saved. The gospel tracts do work. He got saved, and then soon after he got a call because he wanted to go to China. And he wanted to go to China to proclaim the gospel. And this time, think about the British Empire in the 1800s. There was a lot of trade with India and China. And so there were settlements along the coast in China. And so he got this idea in his head, I'm going to go to China. But in order to go there, he's like, you know what? I can't go there and just, be who I am today. I need to grow and be a stronger person. Because back in those days, if you're a missionary, you packed your stuff in a casket. Because you realize sometimes when you go overseas, within a couple of years, you die. All right? Because medicine like polio and stuff was like still around, okay? And so there's a lot of stuff you can catch and just die from. And so he knew that he had to be like a strong person both physically and spiritually to go over there. So some of the stuff he did while he was in England, he would serve among the poor in England, right? He would eat very little even while he was in England, because he's like, you know what, I gotta learn to live on very, very little, right? So even though he had like a stipend from being a doctor, he like just ate bread and apples. That was like his diet and stuff like that. Because like, you know what, I gotta trust in God, I gotta learn to live on simplicity, because what if I'm in China and there's like a famine or something like that? I gotta learn how to live on that now. Every single day, he would just listen to God and follow, and even in the hardest environments and harshest places, he would just follow God. And so one day he finally became ready and he went to China. And China was, as he expected, really, really, really tough. Part of the reason why is because if you watch old Chinese movies, you'll see this too. Like, watch the way old Chinese movies portray the British. All right, it's usually bad. All right, they're usually like the foreign devils and stuff like that. That kind of a bad kind of connotations with that. Hudson Taylor experienced that when he was in Shanghai. He actually went to Shanghai first. A lot of the Chinese people were like, okay, nice, like be courteous and stuff to him, but they wouldn't listen to him. And so he realized like he really couldn't engage people with the gospel. All right, so even though he was ready to live among the poor and all that stuff, like he wasn't ready to engage with the gospel. So what did he do? Look at the way he's dressed. In case you didn't notice, that's not English dress. That's not the way English people dressed back in the 1800s. What he started to realize is that just like the poor, you go and become like the poor. Just like the Chinese, you become like the Chinese. And so what he started to do, he started wearing Chinese clothing. He actually cut off his hair and did, you know like those Chinese ponytails and stuff like that? He actually did that, all right? There's a funny story. He actually tried to do that himself at the first time, and like he almost like went blind from the dyes and stuff, and then he decided to have someone else do it for him. So he grew out like a ponytail and stuff like that, and started wearing Chinese stuff. And you gotta understand, you can see that as innovation, like, oh my gosh, he's so creative. But the British saw that as super rebellious, right? You can understand that today. If Pastor Jimmy had a bunch of tattoos, right? Some of you would be like, cool, right? Like a lot of dudes in San Diego are like military and stuff like that. Tattoos will help you relate, right? Some people, maybe even myself, I'd be like, dude, why'd you get a bunch of tattoos? Like, why do you like that? All right? And so some people see that as rebellious. That starts becoming part of his reputation. Okay, he's a super spiritual person, relies on God every day, listens to God, becomes like those he is serving. But in some ways, he's also an innovator and a rebel. All right, so even among the missionaries, he's kind of known as that guy with that tattoo guy. All right, he's kind of known as the guy. He's kind of edgy, he's kind of out there. All right, and so either you like really love him for how he innovates, or you're kind of like, dude, this guy is not like the rest of us. The missionary community, both then and today, is really close knit. Right, so I pretty much know like most missionaries in Shanghai, and know most nonprofits stuff like that in Shanghai. It's a small community. Back then, it was the same way, right? You pretty much knew everyone in social circles. And one person in the missionary community. Oh, let me show you a quote by him. There are 3 stages in the work of God: impossible, difficult, and done. I think this really characterizes who he is as a person. Right? When we think about his heart, when we think about the way he lives his life, he looks at tasks in life as impossible. All right, like God has called me to do this. There's no way that we're going to reach Chinese. All the missionaries have failed so far on the coast. It's impossible. Then it's difficult. I'm going to dye my hair and do all these weird Chinese things. And all of a sudden, one day, a bunch of Chinese are evangelized. Then it's done. That's the kind of person he was. That kind of person is very different than Marie Taylor. Marie Taylor, her dad was a missionary to China. Her dad actually died serving in China, like I just said. Those are some hard days back in the day if you want to be a missionary. So her and her sisters, they were orphaned because their dad died in China. So then she was in the care of a guardian, and then she actually went to Shanghai, Ningbo. Ningbo is right next to Shanghai. My grandparents are originally from Ningbo, and most people like them emigrated to Shanghai. So Ningbo is near Shanghai. After her parents died, her sister went to become a missionary in Ningbo, Shanghai area. And then she's like, all right, I'll go with you. So she goes there, and then she starts becoming an educator at a school. All right. she is a lady. She is a lady because think about her legacy, right? Her dad is basically like a martyr, right? Her dad was a missionary who died in China, and now she's going herself to China, right? So think about her family situation, how people view her, and the circumstances in which she grew up in, right? And so she grows up in the missionary community. Her dad is well known. She herself is educated, and she came with other missionaries. And you can imagine her interactions in societal life in Shanghai. Back in the days in Shanghai, you basically can think of what kind of people were there. You basically have politicians who are there. You have a bunch of businessmen, and then you have missionaries. All right. And so if you have high reputation, you roll in those circles. You roll in those circles because the businessmen and the missionaries are really usually well connected because they are all British, right? And there's a small circle. So she herself is rolling among people who are like upper class society. She herself is not super rich, but just like the friends she has are more educated. Okay? So she is a lady. Now think about what I just told you about Hudson Taylor. He's like the Pastor Jamie with the sleeve tattoos. Okay? I don't know. Actually, some of you guys, he hasn't been to doctors' parties and stuff like that, the white lab coat ceremonies and stuff like that. How many of those people have tattoos? All right? Or have you ever been to entrepreneur networking and stuff? How many people have tattoos? Right? In certain circles, you just don't see a lot of rebels. In upper middle class circles and stuff like that, you just don't see a lot of people with tattoos and piercings, right? They're kind of plain, let's not stir the waters kind of person. All right? Marie Taylor is kind of from that world, right? She's kind of that missionary's kid, rolls in nice circles kind of person. And Hudson Taylor is from that world where he was working among the poor, becoming like the Chinese. And so you can see right off the bat that there's two worlds that are colliding there. So you guys appreciate that. Some of you were like, why are they laughing? Marie Taylor, she was under the care of a guardian in the missionary settlement because she was I think 20 years old when she met Hudson Taylor. Imagine if you met Hudson Taylor, and most of you guys are from upper middle class backgrounds. You see a guy roll up with piercings and tattoos, right? How would you react to that person right off the bat? And now imagine if you're 50, 60 years old, right? How would your parents react to that kind of person? Even if they're a Christian and a missionary, right? You'd just be like, I don't know about this person. So Marie's guardian did not approve of Hudson Taylor. All right. Hudson Taylor, again, he was kind of a little bit edgy, kind of out there. He was seen as beneath her, too much of a weird guy. All right. But Hudson Taylor, man, he try hard. All right. So he meets her. It's a small missionary community, so they serve together a little bit. And he's like, all right, right off the bat, he's like, all right, I'm going after this girl. All right. And back in those days, you DTR real quick. You don't be like, hey, you want to hang out with friends and for 2 years. And then after 6 years of dating, maybe we can hold hands. Back in those days, you declare your intentions real early. All right, Hudson Taylor meets Marie Taylor and is like, I want this woman. I want this woman. And he writes her a letter and says, I want to be with you. Will you please be engaged to me? Yeah, this is straightforward. This is real forward back in the day. Probably because you don't live that long either, right? So if you're not going to live that long, you might as well get married. So he writes to her and he says, please, consider marrying me. I think we'd be great together. We can both missionaries. We can both serve together. I think we have the same heart. All right? And so if you're a romantic person, you're like, oh, that's great. 2 missionaries who love to serve the Chinese people, want to get together. It's an amazing thing. But Marie's guardian, Miss Adderley, she says no, because he has tattoos. He dresses like the Chinese. All right? And so what's crazy about the story is that her guardian, Miss Adderley, actually sits down behind her and watches her write out a letter rejecting Hudson Taylor. Right? The British don't mess around. That's some hardcore stuff. All right? So she basically watches her write a letter to Hudson Taylor and be like, no, thank you, but no thanks. All right? Even though Marie Taylor in her heart is kind of this guy's kind of interesting, kind of want to be with this guy. Time goes on. Hudson Taylor finds out that it's actually Miss Adderley who's actually really against it. And because he's a kind of rebellious kind of guy, you can kind of assume that by some of the things he's already done, he decides to pursue her anyways. right? Decides to pursue her anyway. So he writes to her like a secret note, asking her to meet somewhere where he gets to confess his love to her, right? And so he ends up actually doing that, all right? He ends up actually writing a secret note, meeting up with her, and he finds out that she actually really likes him, and he likes her too, all right? And then they're going to basically go around Miss Addersley. So they write a letter to her, an actual guardian back in England, about their desire to get engaged. And then and if you think about it, it's kind of crazy, right? Like going around her Chinese guardian. Her actual guardian in England approves, right? Actually approves of their engagement and says, I think part of that is because when you're not in that immediate, like, small echoing chamber, you know, like, you might look at Hudson Taylor a little more differently than a person who just can only see the tattoos and piercings and dressing like the Chinese. And so they actually get the go-ahead to be engaged in England. Here's why I believe they were meant to be together. When they plan their wedding, they have a hard time planning their wedding because there's a famine that's going on in China at the time, right? And they actually sell everything, give all their money to help those with the famine. So they actually almost had no money to have a wedding, right? The way they start their relationship and the way they start their marriage is going to characterize the challenges they're going to face throughout their marriage. That's key. That's key. How you start and how you deal with the hardships of that start in some ways determine what your relationship's going to look like years and years down the road. So right off the bat, there's opposition because of Hudson Taylor and the way he is and how he's an innovator, kind of a rebellious guy. And right when they start, they sacrifice of themselves for those that they're reaching. And so they have a really, really simple ceremony, right? He basically just wears like a cotton robe and stuff like that. She wears like a really simple dress, and then they get married. As time goes on in their ministry in China, they're going to face opposition just like that. They have a bunch of their kids suffer illnesses and die in China because of the various diseases and stuff like that going on. All right. Later on, they have to go back to England to convince people to leave England and go to China. All right, and not just do that, but like I said, most of the missions at the time were on the coast. He started the China Inland Mission because he realized that all the missionaries are basically living with the businessmen in like nice parts of China. And they wanted to go to the interior of China where it's like pretty much you might get killed. All right, because there's no British soldiers and stuff to protect you if something bad happened to you. But he went to England to recruit to go to inland China. Live that rebellious, innovator spirit. That was their entire life. If you read the life of Hudson and Marie Taylor, it's hardship after hardship after hardship after hardship. How they started and how they handled the hardship of how they started, right, determined what the relationship was going to be like later on in life. And in some ways, like, you know, if I was at that time looking at them, I'm like, if you can handle this opposition from her guardian, right, either it crushes you, which means you shouldn't be together anyways, or you strive and overcome it, in which case you'll be prepared for what's coming next. That's how you should look at opposition. That's how you should look at opposition early on in relationships. If you see opposition, and if you see any trials in your life as stuff like, you know what, I can't believe this is happening to me, this is the worst thing in the world, right? Maybe the relationship isn't for you. Because in a lot of ways, how you deal with that opposition is how you're going to deal with it 5, 10, 20 years later. Because you guys haven't lived enough life to know life isn't super easy, right? Like, a bunch of stuff happens in life. And so how we deal with that, and especially how a partner deals with that with us, is going to shape whether we're meant to be together. The fact that she didn't run away, right? I don't want to downplay that. The fact that they wanted to get married during a famine with no money, and they said, we still want to be together, let's just have a simple wedding. That to me, I'm like, you guys are meant to be together. The way you guys are handling this crisis tells me you're going to have a good marriage because your heart's in the same place. Whereas, because she's from maybe a nicer background, he's from a rebellious background, they could have been like, well, let's wait till there's no famine, and let's wait 5 years, 6 years, 8 years. You're a doctor, so go make some more money in England first, come back, and da-da-da. Then I'm like, dude, it's not going to work. Your heart's in different places. That's why trials happen. Let me show you a Bible verse about that. Go to this slide. Oh, hold on, Austin. I think this is the wrong back one. add another slide. And we're going to wait for the 1 Peter 1:7. 1 Peter 1:7 says, "These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world." These trials, this can any period in Christian history, talk about Old Testament, New Testament, 1800s, 2015. These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, because gold is always surrounded by impurities, right? You don't really find pure gold. Though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. What you need in life is not easier situations. Okay? What will make your marriage and family and single life happy is not more money, is not living in a better city with no crime and a nice house. It's not having kids without any disabilities or special needs. That will not make your life better. I guarantee you that. That will not make your life better. The only thing that I know, and this is what the Bible tells me, that will make your life better is faith. Faith in the God that can provide everything. Faith in the God that creates everything out of nothing. Right? You know why gold isn't that valuable? Right? Because gold is only tied to worldly wealth. It's only tied to the material world. But God couldn't create material out of nothing. So that's why I have faith in God, not in gold. The reason why I don't trust only in medicine is because there's diseases I don't know of. Therefore, I trust the healer who created our bodies and healed every disease. I promised today I was talking more about this too. I posted this on Facebook. What do you do about your partner and their sexual history in their past? Part of the question is, what do you do if your partner has a criminal history? What do you do if your partner used to be in drugs? What do you do, different things from a different past and come into a relationship? This verse answers that. What kind of a person are they now that they went through the trials? If the person you're thinking about pursuing has a drug history, if the person you're thinking about pursuing has a criminal history, or was a really, pagan person before they became Christian, what did those trials produce in that person? Did it produce gold? That's the question. Did it produce gold? A person with a lot of sexual history, who are they now? Are they more holy because they trust in the God that makes them holy? If the person with a criminal history, do they live with an amazing amount of integrity because they trust in the God who is honest and truthful in all things? If that's the case, and if that's how God sees them, you see them the same way. As Christians, we see every single person the way God sees them, and we treat them the way God treats them. And again, I think just practically, the reputation matters. Right? Who they are now matters. Practical advice. Why do these kinds of trials happen? Let trials be a way of seeing a person's true character. And let trials be a way of seeing whether it's a relationship worth fighting for. All right? I'll give you a practical example of this. Carmen and I counseled a couple as they were graduating college. And they asked us, because their parents were not on board with them, continue the relationship, because she wanted to go to school, and then he wanted to work, and da-da-da-da. All right? And as we were sitting there talking to them, in the conversation, a lot of what we heard on the girl's side was how she wanted to go to school and finish her degree and all that stuff. And the guy's side is just I want to get married and da-da-da. Right? And so what we heard was she really wants to go to school. Nothing about marriage. She just really wants to go to school. And the guy's I just really want to get married. That's not going to work. Your heart's in different places. Right? Another example of that would be this. Two people want to get married. All they say is they want to get married. How they love each other, their family, the community supports each other. The problem is they don't have enough money because they're 21 years old. Get married. Figure it out. Right? It's just money. You can always make more money. I'll tell you, when Carmen and I got engaged and got married, when we got engaged, I was 24, she was 23. All right? And I was going through seminary at the time. All right? And the only thing really holding us back at that point was just money. And so I looked at it like, we both want to be married, and our family community supports us. And the only thing holding us back is the fact that we're afraid we're not going to pay our bills. Let's figure it out. Right? Like, we're adults. Let's figure this out. This won't be the biggest trial in our life. That's the key. Right? This will not be the biggest trial in our life. Let's overcome this together as a family instead of as individuals. It's practical advice. I'd rather overcome this together as a family than figure this out as individuals. Because that's what our marriage and our family is going to be like. We face all challenges together as a family, not as individuals. So when Carmen has issues with trying to be a counselor or a therapist, that's my problem too. Right? When I do bodybuilding and I'm super moody and emotional, that becomes her problem too. All right? It's actually really good. I mean, we've been together for like 10 years now. It's like she knows what to say, not to say to me at bodybuilding stuff. Because I'll be super critical of myself and she'll just like not talk. Like she won't agree or disagree. She's like, okay. She just sits there. And she knows like when I'm going through that, like just don't bring up anything. Just move on. Trials, right? Hardships. Face them together. That's how you know it's going to work out. If you're practical advice, if you're willing to face it together as a family, right? That's what your marriage is going to be like. If you're already deep, have individual plans and desires and dreams, that's what your marriage is going to be like. You're going to live as individuals in a marriage. Why do you want this relationship? Why do you want to be together? What changes if you have this relationship? Some questions to ask. All right. Let's say you marry this woman. Let's say you date this girl. All right. Let's say you say yes to this guy. What changes? Right? How do you make the life of your spouse better? In a Christian sense, let's raise the vision of what you're trying to do. All right. Yes, you want to be married because you're lonely. You have nothing to do at 8 o'clock at night. Okay? You sit there, you're like, man, just sitting here doing nothing. All right, therefore I want to get married. Let's raise that vision a little bit. Okay? Hudson and Marie Taylor. Let me read into their intentions. All right? Let me read into their intentions because of what they did at the end of their life. Hudson Taylor was always building teams. Right? He didn't do missions alone. He had a bunch of workers with him. Right? And he was always looking for partners. And in one sense, he wanted a family partner. That was Marie Taylor, because she was also a missionary. Marie Taylor agreed to go with her sister family, right? She loves her family, to China, which is far away. It's where her dad died too, if you think about it. It's kind of crazy. All right? And she was loving fan victims in China. What does she want? She wants family, and she wants to serve people. So if they get together, what's going to happen? They're going to have a family, and they're going to serve people. Those interests are aligned. Right? Fight for that. That's what you guys really want. Right? Fight for that. What changes if you have a relationship? You guys do what you already do better. Right? Because now you have your own family together and you get to serve those who are unreached together. How do you make the life of your spouse better? Hudson Taylor's lonely. You're lonely. Right? You want to have kids. You want to have a family. Good. Do that. Today, Hudson Taylor's great-great-grandson works for OMF International. All right? That's a legacy. That's a legacy. I think that's what they wanted. I think that's what the Taylors wanted. They wanted their immediate family and all those around them to serve in the work of the gospel. And they got it. Why do you want this relationship? All right? Raise the vision. Raise the vision of what you're trying to do. Don't just because like, oh, I'm 34, I need to get married now. All right? Or because I keep going to the movies by myself. It is really sad. Some people hate that. Sometimes I'll do that. Go to myself. It's the power of love. This is what they did with their life. China Land Mission. They go back to England and they recruit 24 missionaries. Right? 24 missionaries are the start of the China Inland Mission. The reason for 24, there were 12 original provinces in China during that time. and they wanted 2 for every province. And then the China Inland Mission was born. At the turn of the century, in the 1900s, 1 out of every 4 missionaries was a China Inland missionary. All right, that's how big their mission became. Right, it was gigantic. All right, in the 1940s, when all missionaries got kicked out of China, they became OMF International, which is what I work for today. I have a job today because Hudson Taylor decided to pursue Marie Taylor. Right? If Hudson Taylor never pursued Marie Taylor, I wouldn't have a job today. I would not be living out my calling and my vision today. But because at 20 years old, Hudson Taylor said, I want to be with this woman, even though her guardian says I suck and I have tattoos and stuff. All right, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways. And because he pursued her, and because they lived a faithful life and had a bunch of kids, and then they had a bunch of partners with them, the organization survives today. That's an amazing vision for a family. Right? And that's why you should struggle through parents disagreeing with you, or money issues, or your past, or stuff like that. That's why you should fight and struggle through it. Because if a family is raised well, and you guys love each other, and you guys serve God together, the power of that family, the way God uses families, is an amazing thing. Hudson Taylor couldn't have done what he did by himself, right? So what I told you about like him dressing like Chinese and being like kind of rebellious, that's in his 20s, right? And you probably have friends like that in their 20s. When they're single, what do those guys look like in their 30s and 40s and 50s? Right? Kind of like, that weirdness is cool when you're young, and then as you get older, it becomes like, dude, you got to tone it down a little bit, or like, round out the edges a little bit, right? And that's what Marie Taylor did for Hudson Taylor. Hudson Taylor could not have, I don't think he could have led a mission like China Inland Mission if he was what he was like in his 20s, because it's too weird, right? It's too hard to lead people in that weirdness. You would attract too many weirdos to China Inland Mission. So Marie Taylor, from her background in high society, right, upper middle class, CEC kind of world, right, rounds him out a little bit, so when he goes speak at churches, they don't just tune him out. All right, because you know that. Some Christians will just tune you out. If you have tattoos, you wear weird stuff, it'll tune you out. So Marie Taylor, because she's from a better background, kind of rounds him out the edges a little bit, right? So that he can actually become a president of a mission. What did Hudson Taylor do for Marie Taylor? She wanted a family. The fact that she followed her sister to China shows how much family meant to her, right? And they had that. They had an amazing family. Such an amazing family that their great-great-grandkid still works for OMF today. I think that's what Marie Taylor wanted. All right, and Hudson Taylor provided that. And I think he's a pretty good dad, right? When all your descendants keep working for OMF, I think it means you did a pretty good job of sharing that vision down. It's the power of love. All right, small group time. Ask you guys this: how do you know when you should really fight for a relationship? Give some of your own opinions on that. And what do you advise your friends? This is application of what you're going to say. How do you advise your friends when they are in a tough relationship? And you guys are old enough, so all of you guys have a friend who's in a tough relationship. And when should people break up? All right? Should give you enough stuff to talk about in your small group time. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for this time. I thank you for the Christian heroes who are before us, the witnesses, the great cloud of witnesses before us. And God, I ask that you would teach us and encourage us and give us the same faith that you have given them, to love us in the same way you have loved them, and help us to have just the drive and the passion and the vision that they also had. So God, speak to us tonight and bless us in our small groups. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, David. So we have 14 people here today.